Top 10 Haunted Places in Kansas. The Brown Grand Theater, Concordia. Built in 1907, it hosted many renowned artists such as Martha Graham, John Philip Sousa, and Charles Coburn. The last movie screening was in 1974, but the community restored the theater to its former glory and is used for venues for concerts, plays and special events. The spirit of Earl Brown is believed to roam the building. The water fountain water runs constantly. An apparition of a figure wearing period clothing and wandering the balcony has been seen, and nails mysteriously appeared during restoration in the 1970s. An employee from the grocery store across the street spotted a couple dressed in old-fashioned attire enter the building through a door that is always locked. The man was wearing a soldier's uniform and the employee did not see them leave the theater that night. Reports of EVP recordings, seeing shadow figures backstage, unexplained shadows in the balcony, and disembodied voices coming from the catwalk. Kansas State University, Manhattan. The college is believed to be haunted by Edward D. Eddie Wells. He was a popular student and accomplished athlete. Eddie joined the military when the U.S. entered World War I and was stationed on the Western Front. He was killed on the battlefield on September 12, 1918. It is believed he returned to a place where he was loved and contained good memories, Memorial Stadium. There are reports of seeing a white, hazy shadow behind curtains, something knocking over equipment during late-night rehearsals, and doors mysteriously slamming. Eldridge Hotel, Lawrence. Originally called Free State Hotel, it was built in 1855 and was burned down twice in the mid-1800s. Part of the hotel is believed to be haunted by Colonel Shaler Eldridge. There are reports of water bottles crackling in the middle of the night, the air conditioner randomly turns on, and luggage bags shake out of nowhere. The fifth floor is haunted by something else. Room 506 is said to contain a portal to the spirit world. Reports of breath marks on recently cleaned mirrors, doors opening and closing on their own, lights turning on and off by themselves, cold spots throughout the fifth floor, apparitions, and the doors of the elevators open and close by themselves. Temple Church, Gypsum. A mile south of another haunted location called Devil's Washboard is Temple Church. This church is a small rural church on a dirt road named South Amos Road. The church has a cemetery in the back that is located next to the playground equipment. The cemetery and playground is surrounded by a chain-link fence. There are reports of seeing shadows pass by the large glass front doors of the church. The playground equipment move on its own with no wind. Shadows move throughout the cemetery, and knocking coming from the headstones has been heard. Theodosia Bridge, Valley Center. Also known as the 109th Street Bridge. There are several legends that surround this bridge. The first legend is dated back to the late 19th century. It says settlers were passing through the area when Indians attacked them and kidnapped a baby named Theodosia. Her mother left the wagon train in search of her child. To this day she is still looking for her daughter. It's said people can still hear her mournful cries near the bridge. Another legend tells of a cavalry attacking an Indian tribe unprovoked and an Indian woman is stabbed on the bridge and dropped the baby in the creek below and the baby drowned. The last legend tells of an engaged woman who fell in love with another man and had his child. In a jealous rage, her fiancé threw the baby over the bridge into the creek and Theodosia jumped off the bridge to save her baby but they both drowned. With all of these legends the reported experiences are similar. Reports of floating lights, eerie shapes, the apparition of a woman around the bridge, cars mysteriously stalling as they cross the bridge. If the car is stopped the whole vehicle will begin to shake, cold breezes come from nowhere, sounds of mournful cries, and cries of a baby. It is said if you call out to Theodosia and tell her you have her baby, she'll come out of the water and attack you. The original iron and wood bridge burnt down in 1974 and was rebuilt, and then destroyed again in a fire in 1976. It was closed for the next 15 years and in 1991 the road was reopened and the current concrete bridge still serves for travelers to cross the creek. Devil's Washboard, gypsum. In the 1950s, 7 teens died. It was their prom night and 3 boys and their dates were headed to Devil's Washboard to scare their dates. Unknown to them, one of the boys' brothers hid in the trunk in an attempt to join them in their fun. The washboard is 3 hills in a row, each getting steeper until the last, which was the steepest of all. The teens made it over the first 2 hills before crashing their car on the side of the third. The local sheriff's department put the compacted car on top of a pole to warn others of the consequences of taking on the challenge of Devil's Washboard. The car sits about 150 feet from the road of the final hill where they died. There are reports of hearing the screams of the teenagers when passing over the last hill, seeing orbs especially over by the car, and overwhelming feelings of sadness and grief. Hott's House, Tescott. Built in the early 1900s by Swiss stonemason, Albert Muller for Henry and Bertha Hotz and their 8 children. The house was a 2-story home built with quarried stone from a rock formation Muller found in the field across the road. The house had a hand-dug well under the house that was used for cooling milk and butter, and it was accessed through a trapdoor in the kitchen. It also featured a carbide gas stove and light system and water piped in from a cistern. Hotz had insomnia and would often go by the well to cool himself at night. He started digging a tunnel near the well and continued tunneling under the carriage shed, shop, and chicken house. That is where his 2 tunnels joined in a room with a concrete room. The third tunnel went into a hillside in the pasture nearby. When the water level rose, the tunnels would flood. Hotz eventually kept a boat nearby for when they did flood. The sand from the tunnels he built would be mixed with concrete, and he used that for building most of the outbuildings on the property. This included 2 cisterns, culverts, fence post, ornate pillars, cat dishes, calf feeders, chicken waterers, brooders, can press, molasses boiler, table, shed, and a fort that was a partial underground livestock shelter. Hotz had 15 cattle on the property that started dying off. Legend says Hotz thought his wife was a witch and had something to do with the cattle dying. He went mad and murdered his wife and 4 of his children and took their bodies to the tunnels below the house. Out of grief, he committed suicide in the tunnel next to his family's bodies. Stull Cemetery, Stull. This cemetery is thought to be one of the 7 gates to hell. The cemetery was built in 1869 to accompany a small church built in 1867. The church was active until 1922 and was abandoned for the new church that was built across the road. The original church was torn down in 2002. Legend says in the 1850s the devil and a witch had a child together, and the child died during birth and is said to be buried in Stull Cemetery. The devil visits his child's grave on Halloween and the spring equinox. The church is said to have a stairway that leads to hell, and that is how the devil is able to visit. In November 1974, the University Daily Kansas released an article telling the legend and stories of local college students that have experienced and witnessed paranormal things at the cemetery. This made the cemetery a hot spot for teens looking for the paranormal and looking for a party. There are reports of being grabbed by an unseen hand, unexplained memory loss while visiting the cemetery, no rain will fall in the church and the church has no roof, and feelings of constantly being watched while on the grounds. 2 men were visiting the cemetery one night when a strong wind came out of nowhere. Frightened, the men ran back to their car only to find it facing the opposite direction they parked. Sally House, Atchison. The house was the residence of an Atchison physician. The front of the house was for office space and an examination room. The doctor and his family lived upstairs. The house is named after 6-year-old Sally. Her mother frantically rushed her to the doctor because she collapsed from abdominal pain. The doctor believed it was appendicitis and knew there was no time to delay the operation. The doctor began to cut into Sally before the anesthesia took full effect. Her painful screams stopped suddenly and she died on the operating table. The last memories Sally had were of a man she believed was torturing her. In 1993, the house was rented to a young couple. Their dog would growl and bark at nothing, and it got worse around the upstairs nursery. Fires broke out in the house and sinister attacks on the husband began. The area that housed the operating room would turn cold. He could feel scratches up his chest and abdomen. The ghost never attacked the woman or child. There are reports of electrical equipment suddenly stop working, full batteries drain to empty in seconds, objects move by themselves, unexplained scratches and bruising, unseen hand touching guests, unexplained quick cold spots, and dogs refusing to enter the nursery. Fort Leavenworth, Leavenworth. Originally named Cantonment Leavenworth, it was established by Henry Leavenworth on May 8, 1827. It was the first settlement in Kansas Territory. The post was evacuated in May 1829 and occupied by Kickapoo Indians until the fall of 1829. The name was changed to Fort Leavenworth on February 8, 1832. Several old officers' houses are haunted. Reports of faces in the back of fireplaces and strange noises heard at night. The ghosts are believed to be inmates who were executed at the United States Disciplinary Barracks. The Chief of Staff Quarter has a never-ending tea party. No apparitions have been seen, but reports of hearing the sound of tea parting coming from an empty parlor. Former site of St. Ignatius Chapel was built where a house now stands. In 1875, the church and rectory burnt down. The fire claimed the life of a young priest who had been assigned there. Salvageable building material from the church was used to build the new residence. Some scorched bricks make up the fireplace in the dining room. Several names are etched into the bricks, including Father Fred. Many reports of seeing the apparition of Father Fred walking through the house in his priest robes. He is mostly seen walking up and down the stairs and in the kitchen and dining room. In the 1970s, his ghostly figure appeared in a Polaroid photograph taken at a dinner party. The General's residence is said to be haunted by the ghost of General George Armstrong Custer. He is often seen roaming the first floor of the residence. It is said he stays because Fort Leavenworth was the site where he was court-martialed for leaving his command and mistreating his troops. The old disciplinary barracks had 12 towers along the wall. Before the barracks closed, not all of them were manned. Tower 8 has not been renovated and was never manned. It is closed off, and the only way one could get into the tower is to walk along the wall. Guards often report seeing something moving inside of the tower. A soldier committed suicide at the tower by shooting himself in the head long ago. The control tower would often get a call from Tower 8, but no phone was located in the tower. When a brave guard would answer, there would only be static on the other end of the line. A patrol car reported seeing someone at the top of the tower pointing a rifle at them. No one was in the tower. The other towers were haunted as well. Reports of hearing footsteps and knocking when no one was in there. Building 65 was once the prison hospital, and an unused elevator is said to be haunted. Legend says, 14 German prisoners of war were executed in the elevator shaft by hanging. Guards report hearing screaming coming from the old elevator, and a ghostly man in a wheelchair often being pushed by another apparition is seen on the third floor. In the officers' quarters, the apparition of a man with a mustache and goatee appeared in the fireplace in the middle of a burning fire. Once the fire was out, his face lingered in the back of the fireplace. The face has also been seen in one of the bedrooms and once in the bathroom. Loud footsteps going up and down the stairs, doors slamming shut, scratching noises, and loud crashes are heard throughout the house. The Rockery was built in 1832 and is the oldest house of the base and is haunted by several ghosts. This house is a duplex that has been continuously occupied since it was built. The ghost of a woman with long hair who rushes at people with her long fingernails is seen the most. Another apparition of an elderly woman sitting in a corner chattering is often seen. A third apparition of a young girl is often seen throwing a tantrum. The lost ghost doesn't let residents sleep well. He is reported to be an old man in a nightshirt with bushy hair. The Rockery has the reputation of being the most haunted house in Kansas. The Sumner Place is housing that is haunted by a kind woman in a black woolen dress and shawl. She is known to take care of children and likes to help with household chores. One child told their parents the nice Lacey would read him stories before bed, and his parents found a book that didn't belong to them in his room. She does not take kindly to babysitters, nannies, or grandparents. They've reported getting a strong shove out of the nursery. The shoving got so violent, the residents of 16 Sumner Place had an exorcism done on the house, and she promptly moved to 18 Sumner Place to continue her duties. It is reported she is seen looking out of the attic windows from time to time. The National Cemetery is haunted by the ghost of Catherine Rich, Sutter. Catherine's husband Hiram became the post sutler in the fall of 1880. One day, their 2 children were sent out to gather firewood but never returned. It is believed Ethan and Mary wandered too close to the river and got lost in the current. The search party looked for 3 days with no luck and the children were presumed dead. Their parents stayed during the winter where Catherine would go out daily looking for her children. Walking through the snow for hours calling out for her children, she became ill and died from pneumonia that winter. Hiram moved back to Indiana where he found out shortly after he moved the children were alive and well. They did fall into the river and were saved by a group of Fox Indians who took care of them until spring when the children were returned to the fort. Catherine's ghost is seen wandering through the cemetery headstones wearing an old calico dress and black shawl. She is seen desperately searching for her children. Sometimes she is seen carrying a lantern, while other times just her voice can be heard calling out from the darkness.